Good evening, my friends. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can be with you forever. I'm going to be leaving my email in the description, so if you want to contact me for anything at all, feel free to do so. And if you want me to discuss a subject at hand that you feel is pertinent, feel free to comment below. Today, I'm going to be talking about something a little bit differently. Normally, I've been sort of rooted in spiritual or religious talks, but I kind of want to, bring things back down to earth a little bit and discuss things that are more, not more, but just in line with other interests of mine, namely currency, cryptocurrency, finance. For the record, I'm not into cryptocurrency in the sense that I've invested in any of them whatsoever. I've invested in an Ethereum fund once and got out of it at one point, and I don't really have any particular strong feelings toward them. And the reason being is primarily based on the aspect of currency as a whole, as a general idea and as a concept, in the sense that currency is not an asset. It's not something that's inherently valuable in any real tangible way. And for that purpose, this is specifically the reason why I'm not anti-crypto, but I'm very, very skeptical, very cynical towards especially people who adhere to what is essentially an ideological belief that somehow cryptocurrency is the future and the way to sort of generate wealth, which I semi-agree with, primarily because, in the sense that crypto is the future. I definitely think it's possible in the sense that, we will be moving towards a future in which transactions are carried out digitally and will be utilized primarily through, a cryptocurrency, in the sense that it's a lot more secure in terms of personal transactions, whether that's regulated through a government body or regulated through a very secure algorithm remains to be seen, obviously. Obviously, people who are proponents of cryptocurrency tend to lean towards the idea that because crypto is backed by the blockchain and the fact that the inherent, the transactions are essentially secure in that regard, and that they are basically locked in a personal person-to-person contact. You're not utilizing an institution or a bank to act as a mediary between transfer of currencies, or some kind of third-party private corporation like PayPal, for instance. So on that basis, it seems on the surface like a very valuable resource in the sense of being able to have secure encrypted transactions. Obviously, the problems with that is that because it's incredibly unregulated, a lot of people utilize it for cyber crimes and scams and hacking and, basically ransom. I've met people who have been scammed through crypto, whether it's because they utilized a trading platform that was essentially corrupt. The FTX fiasco is a perfect example of this. Or they were basically scammed by some, third country hacker who held their funds, or, basically blackmailed them to some degree and forced them to pay them in Bitcoin or some other currency. But I'm not really going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about primarily the principles of a cryptocurrency or currency in general, and why this inherent ideology that backs, let's say, Bitcoin, for instance, as being this inherent overriding principle of wealth generation is inherently useless, because a currency is not supposed to provide wealth by its own means. This is the major problem with cryptocurrency, or not the major problem with cryptocurrency, but rather people's perspective on cryptocurrency, where people treat it as an investment asset rather than a form of transaction, which is what Bitcoin was originally designed for, which is what all cryptocurrencies should be designed for if they are to be utilized properly, which is in the sense of I want to buy something online or buy something in person even, and I use an encrypted currency, so that way I am not relying off of the infrastructure of banks and institutions and government bodies to regulate this currency. However, we obviously have seen people attribute value towards these cryptocurrencies because they've inflated in value to such a large degree that people do not invest in cryptocurrency for the sake of having secure transactions. They invest in it because they want to make a lot of money. And this is problematic because the whole point of money is that it's not supposed to have intrinsic value. Things that have intrinsic value are things that provide tangible value in the real world. So things like a house is a perfect example. So if you buy a house, you utilize money, which is essentially worthless, to purchase a house so you can live in and, design it and decorate it and live in that house however you want to, which is besides the point, because you're utilizing the currency to acquire that asset. And the asset itself generates value because, well, let's say there's a limited amount of houses and the population increases within the respective neighborhood, then the property value of that house, with added inflation as well, will go up in value. And that's basically what the current economic system is based upon, which is an inflationary system based upon future value. So whether you agree with that principle or not is entirely irrelevant. The point is that the currency itself, let's say the US dollar, is designed for you to acquire it and utilize it in a way to where it generates value in the future. So people utilize this in the sense, well, they'll dedicate their time at a job to generate income and then use that income to pay their rent or pay their mortgage, buy food, buy other goods and services, buy entertainment, all kinds of things. They utilize their money however they see fit that is valuable to them, right? Having money without an intrinsic aspect or asset to spend it on is entirely worthless, and people recognize this. And this has been the principle since the dawn of currency altogether. When you go back in history to, let's just say, like antiquity in Greece or something like that, you would have an economy based around metals, because metals were a commodity that were widely available around the world and were very easily tradable when you were interacting with other nations, so to speak. So what you would get in Greece, for instance, let's say olive oil, because it was a huge resource and plentifully available, and it is today even though they are living in a current depression economically, you could still get oil like ridiculously cheap, and it's practically everywhere in Greece. However, in Canada, if you were to buy that same olive oil, it would probably be 10 times the price. And we're talking about it in the terms of currency. And this was accounted for back in antiquity as well, where if you would buy something from the Persian Empire, you'd buy some spices, they would be much more valuable in Greece compared to where they would be in Persia. So they devised currency based off of metals, well, because metals are easily found everywhere on Earth. So it was an easy way to transact amongst each other, and that was basically a way to sort of simplify the barter system, because the barter system was incredibly complicated as a means to ascribe value to things. And the inherent acquisition of currency in and of itself provides no actual tangible value for you. It's what you utilize the currency as a means to purchase assets in the first place that is valuable. So when we go back to cryptocurrency, in the sense that people are investing in it so that it goes up in value, so to speak, well, it's like you're utilizing currency to buy more currency so that it goes up in value towards another currency, which happens in trading. If you're in forex, foreign exchange, where you're utilizing discrepancies amongst different kinds of currencies, it's called arbitrage. So the inherent rate of change in the currency exchange between different currencies changes depending on what currency you have. It's kind of complicated, so I won't really get into that. But the point is that unless you're engaging in arbitrage, there's no reason to invest in a currency whatsoever unless you have an inherent knowledge about a specific country's inherent value as a nation, which Bitcoin or crypto doesn't actually have. There's no nation behind it. There's no economy behind it. It's literally nothing, okay? The literal piece of paper that exists for current paper currency is intrinsically worth more than a Bitcoin is worth, right? So when you think about it in this way, you have to recognize that Bitcoin is intrinsically worthless. The only reason it is ascribed value is because people have chosen to give it value, which is the whole point of value in this context. So the only other example you could think of in terms of something that's inherently objectively worthless but ascribes social value, so to speak, is art. So a painting, in terms of its material composition, is pretty worthless. It's made out of canvas and acrylic paint or oil paints, however you want to call it. So the intrinsic value of an actual painting, let's say like a standard, I don't know, let's just say this big. I don't know the dimensions of that, but let's just say that kind of painting would probably cost intrinsically $5. But because it has a social value, an intrinsic value of a material possession that's rooted in an artistic expression, and that someone ascribes value to it in the sense of what they experience when looking at this piece of artwork, the value inherently goes up or it goes down depending on if the art is considered valuable. So this is really the only thing you could compare Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency towards in a realistic way, unless you're utilizing it for transactional purposes, which most people aren't. So when you're looking at a piece of artwork and you're trying to ascribe intrinsic value to it, you have to account for, is this going to have a significant social value in the future? That's if you're an art dealer and you're looking at it purely from a financial standpoint. You could also just be a person who just likes this piece of artwork and you don't really give a shit about the financial ramifications down the line. Ramifications, is that even the right word? I don't know. But the point is that if you're investing in Bitcoin, you're missing the entire point of what investing even means. The whole point of investing in something is that you're buying into something that you ascribe some sort of intrinsic value to. And since Bitcoin is not art, it's just a thing that doesn't exist, you're literally buying nothing and ascribing value to it. And the only value people ascribe to it is based off of how it is related to another currency, which is, in this case, the US dollar. So people look at Bitcoin and it's at like $20,000. The only reason why it's considered $20,000 is because people have ascribed it in the marketplace to be worth $20,000. If it comes to a point where Bitcoin is inherently worthless and nobody wants it, then it just could go to zero because it has no intrinsic value. So that's where you realize that there is inherently no genuine real security in acquiring cryptocurrency as an asset, as an investment strategy. This isn't to say that crypto can't be utilized as a currency whatsoever. I don't agree with that statement. But what I am saying is that if you buy crypto for the sole purpose of accumulating value or accumulating a profit, you're not investing in the right mindset. You're investing in hype, essentially. It's like Beanie Babies. In fact, Beanie Babies are intrinsically worth more because of the fact that they're just a material object that contains sentimental value. There's no sentimental value to Bitcoin. If Bitcoin was worth $0, there would be no reason for you to want to possess it. If a Beanie Baby was worth $0, I could think of plenty of scenarios where someone might want to have that Beanie Baby. If you're a parent and you have children, you'd want to give them the $0 Beanie Baby because the child would enjoy it, or even a grown adult might have some sentimental value towards it. But Bitcoin on its own has no value. There's no reason to own it, right? So why own it in the first place? Because you want to make money in the future. That's really the only reason people have bought into crypto, is because they want to make money. And this is a toxic mentality. This is a complete illusion of the crypto market that currently exists, is because you're trying to utilize money for the sake of making money and acquiring value through money, which money is not supposed to exist. It's not supposed to have value. The whole point of money is that it eases transactions between goods and services. That's it. You don't have to think about it too complicated. A lot of people ascribe so much value to money, whether in a positive or a negative sense, right? They want to make money because they live in a capitalist mentality, or they hate money and it's the root of all evil because they live in a leftist ideological framework where all money is evil and they hate money, and they end up living impoverished because they don't really understand the concept that money is just a transactional product. It's not supposed to have value. It's not supposed to have intrinsic value whatsoever. All it is a mechanism to enact trade. And it's a very powerful tool in order to utilize that if you know how to use it correctly, right? So when we start ascribing value to things like Bitcoin, we are ascribing value to something that essentially does not exist. And for that reason, I have no intention of ever investing in it, specifically for that reason. And people who are experienced investors will also say the same thing. The only people who are into it are people who are kind of just up in their own ass, and they made a shit ton of money in the process, and they think that because of that inherently gives them some sense of authority or some sense of higher knowledge, that they know all the answers to things because, well, I made a bajillion dollars investing in Bitcoin, which was completely, just random essentially. And, you can ascribe value to the blockchain, you can ascribe value to the mechanism and the technology behind it, but the actual end currency itself is meaningless, and it's supposed to be meaningless if you are actually to regard it as a currency that has intrinsic value, which is why we're seeing people who originally were thought that, being paid in Bitcoin was going to be the next big thing. And then people eventually turn their back on it and realize, wait, this is kind of stupid. I don't really want to be paid in Bitcoin, because the value of it just goes up and down so dramatically. It's just ridiculous at that point. You can't utilize that as a currency if you wake up one day and a carton of eggs costs 0.001 Bitcoin, and then the next day it's 0.2 Bitcoin or whatever. If it fluctuates in this capacity to such a large degree, then it doesn't function as a currency really, because a currency is supposed to be level. It's supposed to be relatively stable. In the current economy, it's mechanized to be inflationary, so that the value of the currency increasingly decreases over time. That's the current economic system, devised basically since the 1970s, which is the fiat system. But it's a very stable currency. These currencies fluctuate by pennies, and when a currency goes down by 3 cents, it's like a crazy amount, right? And it wreaks havoc in local economies. I mean, we look at inflation. Inflation increased by like 10% in the last year, which compared to something like Bitcoin, which increased in value by like 50,000% within like a span of a few years. I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, you cannot have a currency function that way and have it be utilized in a real world context, because if we actually were living in a society that relied off of Bitcoin as a currency, we would all be starving to death right now, because the inherent algorithm, the way it's set up, is not designed properly to actually adhere to a proper currency. And this is where we segue into the actual future of cryptocurrency as well, when we realize, okay, how do we actually design an algorithm that creates a currency that inflates or deflates its own value automatically without relying off of third-party institutions like a government body or banks or the Federal Reserve to control these things, when in reality we should be having an automated system. This automated system that generates the algorithm for a currency to be stable in a way that benefits people to enact trade is the real benefit of cryptocurrency, not this Bitcoin retarded shit that just blows up in value for no reason. You cannot utilize that as a currency. Maybe in a third world country where you have like, I don't know, like in Zimbabwe where it costs 10 billion Zimbabwean dollars to buy one egg or something crazy like that. Yeah, okay, Bitcoin is probably even more useful than that because that currency is complete garbage and it has no function in reality because no one knows what the fuck they're doing in those kinds of countries. And but in regards to a country like the United States that has a very well-equipped system in terms of managing their currencies, we don't see those kinds of problems. We see inflation problems, or we haven't seen deflation in many, many years. But in terms of inflationary problems, even the ones where we have moments of extreme inflation like we are currently, we're still able to maintain some sort of baseline, which Bitcoin cannot do because the algorithm is just not programmed properly to actually do this. It's like it mimics the gold standard, which the gold standard didn't really work that well either. People think that it was like this magical currency that solved all the problems. No, there was inflation problems during the era with the gold standard. There was deflationary problems. I mean, the Great Depression was during that time was when we were on the gold standard, right? That's why we got rid of the gold standard, because we realized that relying off of a metal wasn't really that practical when we're talking about a currency which is supposed to not have intrinsic value in the first place. So if we want to talk about crypto being the future, the conversation needs to be shifted towards how do we generate an algorithm that actually manages a currency to be functional in a real world society, not in a way where it's just this imaginary asset class that is backed by absolutely nothing and people just buy it because of a social prerogative that if more people buy it, then the value will go up. That's a completely delusional mentality to uphold. And the fact that it's lasted this long is extremely problematic because people are like zealous about it. But at the end of the day, how do we ascribe this value over generations, right? We want to be able to have a currency that actually has a function over the generations, not just some ability to make money, right? Because if all you're doing is using money to make money for the sake of money, then it's all imaginary. It's all bullshit. It's not real. Then you're basically just a financier, a trader, which is a completely different aspect of things where you're utilizing discrepancies between currencies in order to acquire more currency. And in that context, you're not generating currency just to hoard it for yourself so it generates wealth. You're utilizing that currency so you can buy nice clothes, buy nice cars, whatever people make money for on Wall Street. They make tons of money. What are they doing it for? It's not to just keep the money for the sake of keeping it. They're either going to use that money to invest in companies or financial asset classes in order to generate more income, or they're going to just spend it on things in their life like clothes and food and their house or something. So anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Peace.